What is going on, guys, and welcome to my review of Chucky Season 3. If you've been following along, as opposed to the last 2 years where I did full episode reviews, even the first season I did live streams doing like spoiler wrap-ups with some guests. This year, I just did little short reviews after each individual episode on YouTube Shorts, little 60-second reactions. So this is the first time that I'm going to be talking in any kind of in-depth format on Chucky Season 3. And the reason that I decided to do that, where I was actually pleasantly surprised with Season 1. I was a big fan of that season. Season 2, to say that it let me down would be sugarcoating it quite a bit. And my experience with Season 2 was rough because it seemed like every single week I just turned the camera on and was just forced to be mostly negative every single week in regards to this show. And it just kind of got draining. You know, it felt like I was repeating a lot of the same points. You know, it's tough in and of itself to talk about a TV series episode by episode because you're inevitably reviewing something that you only have pieces to. But the experience of reviewing week to week Season 2 was such a draining experience that I actually said at the end of my Season 2 review that I probably was not going to cover Season 3 until the end. And I decided that because so many people were asking me my reaction to the opening episode, I was just going to do a compromise and do those YouTube shorts. Going forward, if the show gets renewed, I'm probably not even going to do that. And I'll get more into that at the end of this video. But before I start talking about the future of Chucky and my relationship with it, we'll just talk about the pros, the cons, the good, the bad, the ugly, in regards to the third season of Chucky. So Season 2 ended off with the trio yet again getting bested by Chucky, and Chucky pulled this little switcheroo where he was posing as a Tiffany doll the entire season and was working with Carolyn, or is it Carolyn or Caroline, whatever Lexi's little sister's name is, and was essentially going to finally kill Tiffany. And Season 3 opens up, and most of that really regarding Tiffany specifically isn't really followed through with, which I figured. I think most of us figured. And essentially Season 3's storyline has Chucky at the White House, where he is trying to do something. Much like the first 2 seasons, there's a plan that he has that over the first couple of episodes, we start to slowly uncover exactly what that is, what his goal is. And essentially what is revealed, and is one of the things that I like the most about the season that we'll get into, is that Chucky has had a fractured relationship with Damballa, the voodoo god that he has kind of been empowered by the entire franchise, and he's actually facing death for the first time. So he's trying to rack up a bunch of kills inside of the White House because the requirement to repair the relationship with Damballa through Chucky's interpretation is to kill a bunch of people in the White House. It doesn't end up being that exactly, but that's essentially why he is there. So you have him inside the White House, mingling with the first family, the president this time, again played by Devon Sawa. And then you have the trio of kids that discover this and are trying to find a way to infiltrate the White House to stop Chucky. That's basically the overall plot of Season 3. So starting off with the things that I did really enjoy about this season. First and foremost, the gore effects, which were mostly practical, were fucking phenomenal this season. Like, they've been pretty good throughout the first 2 seasons, but I don't know if they changed people that do the gore effects or if they just really lit a fire under their ass for Season 3, but the kills were awesome in this season. They basically every single episode has a premiere kill, at least one of them, and just about every single week there was an awesome kill, like an all-timer as far as Chucky's list of carnage goes. The practical effects on them were super impressive, like especially the one where Devon Sawa gets killed and like he's literally tearing his eyeballs out by his hands, and it was fucking gnarly. Like, you could tell they used some CGI blood here and there, especially with gunshots and things like that. But when they decide to go practical, when they decide to really go for the carnage candy, to me, that was a highlight every single week. So hats off to whoever did the practical effects and the special effects work this season, because you did a fucking phenomenal job. As I mentioned just a minute or so ago, the storyline about Chucky finally facing death and, you know, physically aging, visibly aging, I actually really liked that. We're going to talk a little bit more about pushing this franchise into new territory and the directions they decide to go with that. That is an idea to push things into new territory that I really enjoyed. That's something that we've never done before. Chucky has never faced death. He has died numerous times in the films and on the television series, but he's never actually faced the end of his life. There's always been this confidence that he'll come back. Even at the end of Bride of Chucky, he's like, go ahead, I come back. I always come back. Like, we know that. I mean, that's how you keep the series going. So we know that there's always some way that he's going to come back. But this season actually had me believing that maybe this is the end. Maybe this is the end, friend. And so I actually liked that. I liked how that was slowly uncovered as the reason why he was at the White House. I liked his growing frustration, no matter what body count he racked up, that it wasn't going away and he couldn't figure out how to repair his relationship with Damballa after, betraying him to Catholicism in season 2, which I don't like season 2 whatsoever. I'm beating a dead horse by even mentioning that, but I do like the fact that they kind of justified season 2 maybe slightly with that storyline. The events of season 2 fucked his relationship with Damballa. That was cool. That was creative. So everything from maybe episode 3 or so onward, where that became a big focus up until the last couple of episodes where Chucky was actually aging, facing death, and trying to not only repair his relationship with Damballa, but after accepting death, just trying to take as many people as he can with him as like this big grand finale. I enjoyed that. Devon Sawa continues to be very impressive. I've always been a huge fan of that guy's work. I mean, I grew up in the era where he was really on top with things like even his small role in Casper, but you have things like Little Giants, you have Wild America. Of course, you get into more of his teenage and 20s with Idle Hands and Final Destination. I grew up being a big fan of this guy. Even in Nikita, not a lot of people saw that show, unfortunately. It was a great show, but when he showed up in that, it just immediately perked me up. And he has done some of his best work in this show, I genuinely believe, because every season they find a way to bring him back as a different character. And he always finds these really, sometimes unsubtle, but mostly subtle ways to really give each individual character their own little nuances and be distinctly different than the other characters that he has played on the show. And in this season specifically, he plays 2 different characters, and they're very different. So I thought he did a really good job this season and continues to be one of the shining spots of acting ability, especially in this show, just because it's always impressive to me how you can do so many different characters and find these little interesting ways to make them distinct without putting on a bunch of makeup or, facial prosthetics or something to visibly make them different. They all pretty much just look like Devon Sawa, but he makes them feel different. I also thought Brad Dourif did a great job this season, not only with the voice acting, but we do get a lot of live action Brad Dourif at the tail end of this season. And while I don't necessarily like the vehicle in which we get that, and I'll talk more about that later, having Brad Dourif on screen always makes me smile. I've been a lifelong fan of this franchise. I've been a lifelong fan of Brad Dourif himself, whether you're talking about One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest or even things like Alien Resurrection. I mean, I just love Brad Dourif. So seeing him in the flesh doing Charles Lee Ray again, I think he does a great job. And even the way that, again, especially towards the end of the season, you get the different versions of Chucky voices. He just continues to do such a great job where, I argue a lot about Freddy Krueger. And as much as I adore Robert Englund and I understand that he is forever tied to that role, I always argue that somebody else can embody that role. It's just a matter of finding the right person and giving them the right script. I don't think anybody else could ever be Chucky. I think Brad Dourif, that is his role forever and always. And he just continues to prove, even all these decades later, literally, why he is Chucky. It did take me a couple episodes to warm up to this, but I did enjoy the Lexi and Grant storyline. Lexi in general over the last 2 seasons has easily been the one character of this trio that I think actually stands out narratively, and they're doing somewhat interesting things with her. And so her being on this relentless pursuit of her sister this season gave you a very sympathetic motivation for her, and then her kind of initially manipulating Grant, the first son, to get access to the White House to try to get the information she needs, and then slowly starting to kind of warm up to him and see a lot of things in common with him, and eventually there's some romance that buds there. I think they did a pretty good job with that. So especially given something that I'm going to be talking about regarding the other two characters that really left me cold, at least one of these characters was giving some interesting things to do. So I really started to invest myself quite a bit in her storyline after a few episodes. And finally, I liked quite a bit the things that they did with Jake's character in the finale. You know, not so much the whole season. Again, we'll get into that, but the finale, I liked the little scene that we got with him and the spirit of his father and them coming to an understanding and kind of putting a nice little bit of resolution on that relationship. I thought that was a really nice touch. I also thought that Zachary Arthur did a pretty good job whenever we are getting to the point where Chucky is actually embodying Jake's body. He's possessed Jake's body, and you have him doing the Brad Dourif style Chucky voice, and most of it was him. If you watch the behind the scenes, he was, working with Brad Dourif and trying to get the inflections right and the laugh right, and I think he did a really good job. Brad Dourif is so distinct with what he does with the Chucky voice that I always find it interesting to see different actors try to mimic that. I thought his daughter did a phenomenal job with that in season 1. And to repeat myself, Zachary Arthur did a pretty damn good job for the little bit that we got in the finale. Moving on to the mixed. I wanted to make sure to address this at some point in this video, and this felt like kind of the appropriate spot. I respect and appreciate the fact that they're always trying to push this series into new directions, specifically in the show. Don Mancini is somebody that has always tried to go into new directions and push new boundaries and take the series in into new flavors. And there's people that really works for. There's a number of people that I've seen online that absolutely love what the show is doing, and that's one of the main things that they all say is that the show just never really gets stale. They never really get stagnant. They're always finding ways to reinvent themselves or do something interesting and different. And that is absolutely a fact. And it is important to push things into new directions. As much as I am admittedly stubborn in my love for classic Chucky and the more simple, straightforward, and horror version of Chucky that embodies the first, 3 movies specifically, but even the fourth one, even though there's a good bit of camp and Bride, and even Curse of Chucky, that's more of a simple, back to basics, grounded version. That's the type of Chucky that I love. So my stubbornness in my love for that makes it difficult for me to really accept new direction sometimes, more specifically when it's very campy and silly. And that's just a matter of taste. That there's going to be a lot of people that love those crazy, wild, weird directions. There's going to be a lot of people that really don't. And I at least respect the fact that they never really let the show or the franchise get into a rut where we're just doing the exact same plot line over and over and over again for 8 episodes for multiple seasons. And they wouldn't be able to survive if they did that. So it's kind of a rock and a hard place scenario where I know the need to push things into new directions is absolutely there. Have I loved the directions that they've decided to go in to keep things fresh? Mostly no. And that's why it's in the mixed here. But that is it's complicated. I understand that we have to do things that are different, that we have to explore things that we haven't explored before. And I desperately want to love all those directions. I genuinely do. I just don't. And it sucks, but that's the honest truth. And with that being said, we'll move on to the negatives of this season. Starting off with just some character stuff. This season pretty much solidified for me that it was not a good choice to continue to focus on these trio of kids as the main characters of this show. After season 1, and I liked most of them in season 1, I was a fan of that season. I always felt like the show really lent itself well to do like kind of an anthology style TV series where you have season 1 that's focusing on Jake and Devin and Lexi and that school and the family and all that. And then, Chucky at the end of that season got into multiple dolls, and then Tiffany was driving off with Alex Vincent. To me, that was a good vehicle to take Chucky into a completely different city in a different state somewhere else in the country and start a whole new storyline with brand new characters. And if they want to have the same cast like they did with Devon Sawa, I think even that could have worked. Have the same cast to an extent, but playing totally different characters. But having Jake, Devon, and Lexi be this central through line from season 1 to season 3, I felt like it handcuffed season 2 quite a bit. And when I got into season 3, I mean, for the first 6 episodes or so, maybe even the first 7 episodes, I felt like they weren't doing shit with Jake and Devon, specifically those two. I mean, Lexi even took me a couple episodes to really get into what she was doing. There was a few where it was just kind of her doing the social media, almost OnlyFans direction. And I wasn't really vibing with that too much until they started to get into what was going on with her and Grant. But it just really feels like there's not enough to do with these 3 characters to merit them being the focal point of this show. And season 3 really struggled to keep them relevant to the story. Really struggled. And it's almost to the point where I wish they would have not even been there. And you could have just focused on the White House and the White House family and some new characters there, and just have a little bit more of a lean storyline and do some really interesting things with those characters. It was like it was trying to juggle the White House stuff and the White House characters and the first family with the trio. And the trio always got the short end of the stick, and even the more interesting things that they were kind of exploring with the White House family felt like they weren't fully cooked because we still had to spend time with these characters. And even more specifically with Jake and Devon. And I got to be careful when I say this, because inevitably there's always somebody that completely misreads what I'm saying when I mention this, because I mentioned it, I think, in my short reaction on episode 2 or something. Because they're not doing anything narratively with Jake and Devon, for the first 5 episodes of this season, the only thing that they were doing was almost taking a commercial break from the storyline and showing Jake and Devon's relationship and the fact that they want to have sex. So episode 1, they're kind of hinting at it and making out do you want to do it? And then somebody walks in and stops them. And then episode 2, 3, and 4 was the same scenario. They're trying to fuck and then somebody walks in. And it has nothing to do with their sexual orientation at all. Let me say that clearly, for whatever fucking douchebag is going to try to misinterpret or misphrase whatever I'm doing or put words in my mouth. It's not that they're gay. It's just that them trying to consummate their relationship was the only focus that they gave those characters for about 4 to 5 episodes. They finally capped it off in episode 5, where they finally fucked off camera and they walk in. It's where have you guys been? And they're like... And even in moments in those first 5 episodes where, and I mean moments because that's really all we got outside of those scenes, where they're not just talking about consummating their relationship, it still just focuses on that side of their personality, where she shows a picture on her phone of Grant. This is the guy we got to manipulate. And Jake's ooh, rare. And it turns... It's like it's trying to turn their sexual orientation into their entire personality. And I have a friend of mine that even commented on this whenever I was discussing the first couple episodes in my shorts, who is a part of the LGBTQ community, and basically said all that before I even had a chance to, where it's why are they making this their entire personality, as if somebody who is a part of this community, that's all we are. And so I do think there's some validity to that side of it. But my issue more specifically was just 5 episodes straight of the only thing we're going to do with them is talk about how much they want to fuck. So long-winded way of saying the trio were massively underused. And I think the show has just, they're overplayed at this point. Now, I doubt they're going to get rid of these characters, even given the place that we ended the season with that I'll discuss. But I just feel like the show would be better moving on. Then we have the Jennifer Tiffany storyline, which this has been kind of an issue for me, more specifically the last 2 seasons. But this is the side of the show where they really dial the camp up. They really dial the silliness up. And you had the whole Martha Stewart thing in prison. And it feels like they tell Jennifer Tilly, okay, be as off the charts crazy as you can. Go. That was good. Now double that. Go. And that's the cut that we get. This is obviously the direction they want to take the character. You know, this has been the direction they've taken the character since Seed of Chucky. Again, kind of going back to my stubbornness, I just really loved what that character was in Bride of Chucky. I felt like she was maniacal. I felt like she was serious. She was almost more sick and twisted than Chucky. And ever since Seed, they have progressively just dialed it up to where she is just kind of cartoonish. And so there's aspects to what they did with her storyline that I liked. I enjoyed some of the voodoo doll stuff and getting people to do her bidding inside of the prison, and the whole escape that we got in the finale I thought was pretty exciting. And I am curious for the future of this character now that seemingly we have fully abandoned human Jennifer Tilly. But anytime they cut to her, especially in the first half of the season, it just seemed like that's where they reserved the silliest elements of the show, and the silly stuff just really, I struggled to get into it. Now, I talked about how the trio of characters and the focus that the show put onto them really kind of fought with the focus that they were putting on the White House storyline, Devon Sawa's president character, both of the sons, one of which is kind of latched onto Chucky because he thinks that that's his dead little brother's spirit. And then you have the first lady that's got her own motivations going on. And then she brings in this evil Secret Service agent, which by the end of the season, I have no fucking idea what that guy's deal was, like what his plan was, what his overall goal was. He was just there to be chaotic, I guess. That whole storyline, I think, could have survived really well if that was the whole focus of the season. And it got a lot of the focus, but certain things that were interesting, like Devon Sawa starting to investigate why this doll, or why his youngest son thinks that the dead child is in the doll, and there could be some emotional things there that kind of get snuffed out pretty quickly, and everything with the first lady, I just never quite grasped what she was doing. I don't know, it just, the whole thing felt like there needed to be a bit more to connect all that together to make it make sense, and it was just kind of left out in the open amidst all the chaos that happens in the last couple of episodes. Nothing I can really elaborate on all that much, just very simply, it bummed me out to not see Andy and Kyle play a part in this season. You have a fake out death scene with Andy that was absolutely brutal, and I was like, you better fucking tell me now that this is a dream sequence, because hell fucking no. Luckily it was. But yeah, Andy and Kyle are basically completely gone from this season. And even Nika, while she shows up a couple of times, mostly in the finale, she's all but absent in this season as well. Which, again, I mean, they have a lot going on, so I don't know if there was room for them. And if they would have put them in there, I would have said that the White House storyline and the trio of kids would have gotten even less development. So it's probably for the better that some characters got cut out of this season. I just wish it wasn't those three characters. Those are the ones that I like the most. In the second half of the season, they decided to focus in on this supernatural, paranormal ghost angle, where there are spirits lingering inside of the White House, many of which are Chucky's recent victims. They start to leave like blood messages on the wall and trying to communicate with the living characters. And then eventually that spins into the Charles Lee Ray spirit being in the White House after old Chucky bites the dust. And then, in the finale, we go fully into the spirit realm. See a lot of what I said in the mixed category about new territory. I understand that, a series based off of a serial killer that transfers his soul into a doll through voodoo, it's not that far removed from paranormal ghost stuff, but probably because it's never ever been hinted at for the entirety of this franchise, it felt very sudden and kind of shoehorned in to just suddenly have that be a part of the rules of this franchise in this season, with really no buildup. It's just one episode, suddenly there's ghosts. and it was a little wonky the way that they executed it, where you have like Ghostbusters effects and things like that, and they never really paid off the ghost of Mrs. Fairchild. I thought that was gonna kind of be the focus, where her good intentions were making her be able to like cross the realm to try to save the kids or something, and that ended up just going nowhere. So for like 3 episodes, my little short reactions were like, yeah, I don't like the ghost stuff. And I think that's where a lot of the difficulty comes from in the new directions that they decide to go, and the ghost stuff being one of them, is that it just feels like, especially over the last 2 seasons specifically, there's just no rules anymore. There's no rules, there's no parameters, there's no consequences, there's no anything. It's just Chucky can do literally whatever Chucky wants to do at any given moment. And because things have gotten so batshit crazy and weird and strange, we're just supposed to accept anything as possible. And to me, that has really killed the investability in the show, in the characters, in the overall like struggle that is going on. There's no tension. There's nothing to really invest yourself in as a potential ramifications of what is going on. Like, I had I had 2 or 3 people comment on my reaction to episode 7, where they end off with Jake going into the spirit realm, like basically dying with that syringe, and Tiffany about to be lethally injected. And they were like, how did you not get emotional with those 2 characters dying at the end? That was crazy. And I'm like, you actually think they're going to die? Like, assuming the show doesn't immediately undo this in the next episode, which they do, they're not going to be dead. Like, there's no rules anymore. They can be fucking revived with bringing people back from the dead for dummies book in season 4. Like, that's the difficulty with it. Like, there used to be some stakes. There used to be some goal, some ticking time element of, we've got to stop Chucky or this is going to happen. Or even for Chucky, I've got to do this, otherwise this is going to happen. And it just seems like that's not a reality of this show anymore, because there's always something. There's always a way. There is always some new element that's going to be brought in that was never, ever hinted at or introduced before, that is the escape plan or the new reality of the show. And the ghost stuff was just kind of the new version of that for season 3. And finally, which unfortunately has kind of become par for the course for all 3 seasons, even the season that I did really like, I didn't care so much for the way they decided to end things off. I think that the final episode overall was one of the better episodes of the season, maybe even the series, until the last 7 to 10 minutes. So you have the whole thing where Jake has gone into the spirit realm to try to convince good Chucky to end it all, which to me never made sense, because like his relationship with good Chucky never really clicked for me in season 2, and the drama, the manufactured drama that it caused between him and Devin just seemed like we have to have them fight, so here's a stupid reason to make them fight. But especially given the way that the good Chucky storyline wrapped up in season 2 with him killing Nadine, why you would trust good Chucky at all or think that's even a viable option, I don't know. But regardless, again, there's no rules, nothing has to make sense, we just do whatever makes sense in the moment. We're sending Jake in to go to the spirit realm to end Chucky. Very obviously, Chucky is going to try to take Jake's body. I thought that was pretty clear from even episode 7. And they end up doing that, where Chucky possesses Jake's body and Jake is stuck in the spirit realm. I thought that would have been a great place to end the season and have Chucky be in the trio for whatever storyline we're going to do for season 4, and they don't realize it's Chucky. But of course, they make it blatantly obvious that it's Chucky, first of all, because he doesn't try to like be subtle about Jake's mannerisms or anything at all. He just immediately is saying the most irreverent shit possible and making it very clear that this is not Jake. But then they do the thing that they've been doing for most of the series, which has been a common complaint of mine, is that they don't really commit to ideas. They introduce something that's interesting and then they immediately undo it within an episode. And so 10-15 minutes after Jake has been possessed by Chucky gets out of that and goes back into a doll. So that to me was like a lot of wasted potential. Like, damn, that could have been a really interesting angle to explore for a number of episodes, and we explored it for 10 minutes. But we are introduced to John Waters, who is the creator, the designer of the Good Guy doll. And of course, he's batshit crazy. And so he wants to have children in his house again, or the sound of children in his house again. And so they have this commercial break where they show the three kids something. They're like, hey, look, I want to have kids in the house again. And they do this thing where like they zoom in and go to look at something. And then it cuts to commercial. It comes back later on and reveals that the three kids have been put into mannequins. Oh my God, that looked horrible. As much credit as I gave to the special effects team for the gore, that was equally on the other end of the spectrum of just a terrible CGI effect. And the shame of it is they showed what the actual mannequins looked like without the overlay of the CGI faces, and they looked really good. You could have just had that and had their voices, and it would have been 100 times better. But for whatever reason, they decided to overlay this CGI face, and it just, for the 3 seconds it was on screen, looked dreadful. And the shame of it is, I've said for a while now, you can go back to a live stream that I did with Dave McRae maybe 2 or 3 years ago at this point, where we were discussing the Child's Play franchise. And we were talking about how cool it would be to eventually have the hero or heroes of the story. We were talking more specifically about Andy. And I think that would have been the better direction to go. But regardless, how cool of a direction it would go to eventually take a protagonist of this franchise that is Chucky's, nemesis, and have it be a situation where they're mortally wounded and the only way to continue the fight against Chucky is to put their soul into a doll. And so now you have a actual good doll that is in the mix. You've had Chucky, you've had Tiffany, you've had Glenda for the longest time, but now you actually have a good guy, no pun intended, in a doll. And this is the version of it that we get. Fuck! Be careful what you wish for. So yeah, the three kids get put into these little mannequins, and they're this fucking big, and they're like, Nika, look behind you, Nika! Oh, fuck. Oh. So yeah, they're fucked. I guess they overpowered all three of them and did individual voodoo chants on all three of them while they just stood by, completely complicit in this, and put all three of them one by one into mannequin dolls. But Nika finds them, and of course she's got no limbs, so she can't help shit. And now Nika and the three kids are stuck with John Waters. And they also, as I said earlier, they decide to officially take the Tiffany soul out of Jennifer Tilly's body and put it back into the original Tiffany doll from Bride of Chucky. And the season ends with Chucky and Tiffany making out in the back of the seat while Carolyn is driving away. So I like some of the potential of what's going on here. I just didn't like the way that they went about it. Like having the kids be in a situation where they have to be saved, as well as Nika. To me, this very clearly sets up a scenario where the next season we can have Andy and Kyle be the primary focus of the season. Finally. So I'm cool with that. So they probably, I'm assuming this is the direction they're going to go. They're going to have Andy and Kyle be on the hunt to try to save these kids and try to save Nika for at least part of the season. The only other direction they could go, which I would not be very happy with, is if they have Grant take that role, where Grant is going to be the one trying to save them. And I like Grant's character, but no, I want Andy and Nika. So that's cool. But then you also have at least presumably the Jennifer Tilly body, the human body. We're done with that now. And I'm happy about that because, as I've said, a lot of that stuff has been the ultra silly, campy stuff for now 3 seasons, where they're just really playing into Tiffany sitting around watching Liar Liar and all that kind of stuff that I feel like we've done everything that we can do with that. So her being back in the original Bride of Chucky doll, I'm cool with that as well. But the Chucky and Tiffany relationship, I really wish they would have committed to them being mortal enemies for a bit, because I understand that they just have that toxicity in their relationship. It's like Joker and Harley Quinn. They like love each other and despise each other in equal amounts, and you never know what's going to take over. But they have pulled switcheroo on those two so many times from Bride of Chucky to now, where they're on the same side, and then all of a sudden one of them turns on the other out of nowhere and tries to kill the other, and now they're mortal enemies, but then they love each other again, and just they swapped so many times at this point that the swap has been played out. I actually wanted to see them be against each other, which is what the end of season 2 seemed to hint at, and they just never followed through with it, was that Chucky was finally done with Tiffany's shit, and now he's going to kill her, or at least have a plot to try to kill her. And we've never had that. We've never had a season or a movie where Chucky's goals and Tiffany's goals are against each other, and one of them is going to come out on top. And I thought that they were setting that up very deliberately. They never paid it off, and now they're in love again. So it kind of sets the status quo back to things that we've already done. So again, I don't know specifically what their plans are for season 4. Maybe there's some really interesting ideas. I do like the potential for some of that, but the way that they had to get all of that in place in the last 10 minutes, just, ooh, especially those mannequins, boy. Whoa, man. Oh, if they had just ended the season with Jake being Chucky, I don't even care whatever they were going to do with Jennifer Tilly. She just escaped. You know, that could have been left there. I think I would have been more satisfied. But all of the weird craziness at John Waters' house just kind of was a bit much for me. So that leads me to my future with Chucky. I got to be honest with you. I don't think I'm going to cover the show anymore. And it sucks to say that, you know, like I really enjoyed covering season 1. I covered the shit out of season 1. We did individual episode reviews. I did live streams with guests. I did a season review. I did an episode ranking. I was very pleasantly surprised and happy with the status of the show and the status of the franchise at that point. Season 2 damn near broke me. And I had already toyed with not covering the show after that because of just some certain things that were happening at the time. And I don't know. My experience covering season 3 so far, even the little bit of coverage that I've done, it's just left me in a point where I just feel like there's just no more value to me talking about this. Unless the show makes like some staggering leap in its direction or whatever that really wins me back over. Or of course, if they have a movie, supposedly they're making a movie and I would cover that. But the unfortunate reality is that, like, I adore Chucky. I love Chucky. Chucky is so important to me. It's one of my favorite franchises of all time. And it's been hard for me as a fan to see it go in such a direction that is just distinctly not for me. And that's my own personal taste. You know, it's not like, you know, they're out to piss me off or anything like that. It's not like it's personal. It's just what I like about the series is not really what they're doing anymore. And a lot of what they're focusing on now is not really my thing. And it's hard to invest so much of your time and so much of your energy covering something that's just consistently not for you. And I've said my piece on these directions a number of times since Seed of Chucky, and I just feel like there's no more value to me continuing to say it anymore. It's just, it almost feels like I'm not really adding anything to the conversation to continue to say, yeah, I miss the old stuff. The new stuff's weird, just in various ways. Beyond all of that, and you know, this could completely be false. This could completely be just something that I've created in my head, but I can't shake the feeling that some people involved with the show are aware of my coverage of it and don't like me because of it. You know, I've had good interactions with a couple of them, namely Alex Vincent. I've had a lot of good interactions with Alex Vincent, even through me having some negative thoughts on the show. He's always been a really cool person to talk to, and you know, we talked about Dexter and a few things. So Alex is very cool. I hope to meet him at a con one day. But I interacted with somebody else involved with the show, and they were very cold to me. I had a completely separate person involved with the show that came across a tweet of mine last season where I very plainly and respectfully just said that somebody was asking my thoughts on an episode because I didn't drop my review yet. And all they said was, yeah, the review will be up later today. I didn't really care much for the episode, though. And this person like lashed out at me and kind of shit on me. Then they deleted the tweet after I responded to it. So I don't know if that was to just avoid further interaction or if they realized what they said was kind of out of line. But regardless, that's 2 people involved with the show that I had negative responses from. And then now here recently, a 3rd person involved with the show was doing an interview and essentially made a kind of direct statement about how awesome it is to have 100% Rotten Tomatoes score for season 3, since one critic always spoils the party. And can you guess who the one critic who gave a negative review to season 2 on Rotten Tomatoes was? Now, that last one could absolutely just be a coincidence. That last one could have been them just talking in generalities, and I just assigned more meaning to it than there actually was. But regardless, it's hard for me to shake the feeling that, as much as I'd like to think that what they do and what I do is very much removed, that I don't have a very good reputation among that crew because I haven't loved what they've done, and I've just stated my honest opinion publicly. So all of that basically added up, as well as a lot of things where I've had people like really come at me on Twitter and some other places that are massive fans of the show. And like one person in particular was trying to formulate this whole narrative that I'm like homophobic and I'm against trans people because of my thoughts on the Glenn Glenda character. And just all that added up, a bunch of little stupid stuff that shouldn't really bug me, but all of it adding up to this feeling that my relationship with something that I absolutely love has turned into something where I'm now known as like the hater of it, that I'm a negative presence in the Chucky fandom. And I don't want that. That's not good for anybody, even if it's bullshit, even if I shouldn't have to put any weight into that, and I shouldn't. I just don't like that feeling. You know, I'm just expressing my honest opinion. I think I do it fairly respectfully, but the fact that it's very clearly gone a direction, has continued to go in a direction for a number of installments at this point that is very clearly not the direction that I care for. I just don't think there's any more value to me talking about this series. So I said a version of this last year where I was just like, I don't feel like there's any value to me talking about it week to week. Now I don't feel like there's any value to me talking about it at all. So unless the show takes a giant direction change, I'm still probably going to watch season 4, at least part of it, depending on what they do with it. Unless the show makes a giant turn and I just love what they're doing, or if they come out with a movie, this might be the last Chucky thing you see me talk about, unless I'm ranking the series or talking about something in like a retrospective format. But yeah, I don't know. Chucky, I love you, buddy, but this may be the end, friend. Anyway, guys, for those of you that did watch season 3, let me know your thoughts on it down below. And also give me an idea of where you fall on the spectrum of Chucky fans. Were you a fan all the way from the first film in the 80s? Are you somebody that was recently adopted into being kind of a Chucky fan? Did you start your fandom with the TV series? Give me some context to go along with how you feel about the direction of the show in general, but more specifically, Chucky Season 3. Well, that's it for this one, guys. If you enjoyed that, please click over here for a playlist of all of my Chucky coverage thus far, and I'm also going to put a tier list video that I did up here back after Season 1 dropped, where I talk about all the movies as well as Season 1 of the TV show. Please check all that out, like, share, hit the subscribe button so you don't miss everything in the future. And as always, remember, opinions are like assholes, but that doesn't mean you have to be.